All right, there, econ friends. Welcome back to another video. What we're going to be doing, starting with this topic number 15, is discussing market structure, which, as you know from our intro, is a really big part of micro theory. We know that not every firm operates the same way because different firms, they vary in terms of their size, their complexity, their market power, their pricing power, things like that. So we have different industry types, and a big task in micro theory, and a big task therefore in this portion of the course, is to really start thinking, analyzing, dissecting those different market structures, and then learning how they differ, with the ultimate goal of not just seeing how they operate, but also asking an important question. Of all these different market structures, which ones are better for society? Which ones are more efficient? Which ones benefit the general welfare of the citizens the most? So that's what we're starting off. Here in topic 15, we'll be discussing perfect competition. Now, what I want to do before we actually get into perfect competition itself is just give you, in this video, a brief overview of market structure. Let's jump in. And the basic idea is perfect competition is one of 4 different market structures that we're going to study in economics. And specifically, there are 4 different market structures that we study in the microeconomic section. Now, earlier in previous lectures and discussions, we have learned that every firm has to answer certain key questions, right? We know that every firm's goal is to maximize profit. We've discussed profit. So we know that every firm has to make some critical decisions, including how much of a product to produce, right? That's the Q question, the quantity or the output question. So a firm has to decide how much of a product to produce, and also significantly, what price to charge. And that's the P question. So firms have to decide, make decisions. How much should we produce? What price do we charge for that production? And critically, what you have to take away from today is that the answers to those 2 questions depend on many factors, one of which is market structure. So what is market structure, you ask? Well, when we talk about market structure, you can kind of see it as the environment that a company competes in, or the environment and the set of conditions that an industry consists of. Specifically, we're going to say by definition that market structure refers to the business composition of a specific industry or a specific product market. Okay, it's the business composition, it's the environment. So you say, well, okay, Young, what does that mean? Well, it includes a couple of different criteria. So market structure would include the number of firms that are competing. It would include the relative size of those firms. It would address issues tied to the degree of market power that a firm has, and by extension, the degree of pricing power that the firm has. Okay, so these different questions, and if you look in the real world and you take a look at 2 different, 3 different, 4 different companies, you'll see that they don't all behave in the same context. Okay, so we're taking a look at, how many firms are competing in an industry, a lot or a few, or maybe just one. How big are these firms? Do these firms face a lot of competition or very little competition? Do they have a lot of power in their market or very little? Do they have degree of power over the price decision? So these are some of the criteria that define a market structure. Okay, there's 4 of them. We believe in micro theory that market structures range kind of on a continuum, sort of like you see here, that market structures range from highly competitive, where you have a lot of sellers, they're selling identical goods, therefore each firm has very little clout, if any, to the other extreme where you have completely uncompetitive industries, where, for example, you have a monopoly, where one seller completely dominates the industry, okay? We have four basic market structures, and you can see them here. We have perfect competition, we have monopolistic competition, we have a structure known as oligopoly, and we have monopoly. And our next couple of topics will take these firms, take these industry types, I should say, take these structural types and really break them down. One of your big goals in these lectures is going to be not just to understand the characteristics and traits, because each of these four, right, competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly, they're all going to have different characteristics. So you have to know those characteristics. You're also going to have to know and bear in mind how each of these four firms, how each of these four structures answers the basic questions of how much to make, what price to charge, and do you have profits or losses? But in addition to that, I really want to push you guys to be able to compare these structures to each other, and specifically to compare them to each other so that we can determine which is the optimal structure, which is the best structure to maximize economic well-being for the society, okay? So you have those four. By way of brief definition, we'll start off with the first one, perfect competition. Perfect competition is a market structure in which a large number of sellers are selling, and this is critical, a standardized, spelled that wrong, a standardized, meaning a perfectly identical product. So that's perfect competition. We then have a structure known as monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is another structure. In this structure, you still have many firms, okay? There's a lot of firms here, but critically, those firms are selling a differentiated product. In other words, the products that rival firms are selling are similar, but somewhat different, right? Think about hamburgers. Think about clothing choices, okay? They're similar, but they're just subtle differences. And it's those differences that thrive within that. And that's where the rivalry and the competition occurs between the firms, because they're trying to tailor their products to make you loyal and to get you to favor their product, right? To favor their hamburger or their type of shoes over all their competitive rivals. Our third market structure is known as oligopoly. An oligopoly is a unique structure in which only a few dominant firms run the industry, okay? So oligopoly is a market structure in which a few firms dominate the industry. And critical to oligopoly, because only a couple of firms really dominate the industry, the decisions and the behaviors and the choices of those firms affect the other firms. In other words, firms within an oligopoly structure are highly interdependent. The decisions of Coke influence the decisions of Pepsi, right? The decisions that Delta Airline makes influences the decisions that American Airlines has to make, okay? Because there's a few firms that really run the show, they're interdependent. And they have to make strategic decisions based not only on their own needs, but on the perceived reactions of their competitors. And the fourth and final structure is monopoly. Monopoly is a market structure with a few characteristics. Number one, it has what we call in micro theory high barriers to entry. And critically, a monopoly is a structure in which a single supplier, just one firm, sells a product with no close substitutes. So that, my friends, is an intro to market structure. As you take a look in the real world as you look at firms that you buy products from and firms that you observe, ask yourself, do they behave in similar ways or different ways? Chances are a part of the answer to that question is, which structure do they compete in? Because firms that are perfectly competitive or monopolistically competitive are going to behave different from firms that are oligopolies and firms that are monopolies. Okay, so that's market structure. It's a really important part of micro theory. We're going to be breaking down each of these four into some detailed lectures, and we'll start in our next video with an overview and a dissection of perfect competition. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.